Welcome back to the Fungus TCG channel. Today we're going to be showcasing round 2 of our Versus series. The two decks we're going to be looking at today are going to be Blue Green Stax featuring Clarabelle and Ramp versus Colin on Blue Red items. Our focus today is going to be going over the matchup. We're going to be introducing the deck list before I just talk organically over the match and talk through some of the play lines, especially from the blue-green side, and why or why not you may want to take certain lines to try to navigate this matchup. First, let's take a look at the deck list. Today, I'm going to be playing the Blue Green Stax deck. This is our most recent iteration of the deck, coming off of the CCS 2K, where I had a top 8 finish, landing in 6th place in that tournament. We've made a couple of changes from that deck list, just going up to Heffalumps and Woozles on 4, at the expense of some of the Develop Your Brains. I did have a Peter Pan in this list at one point, that also got reduced out of here. We are up to 2 Cloud Kickers as well to try to give us a little bit of points in some of the green steel discard matchups, as well as the amber steel aggro deck that's been so prolific. But otherwise, more or less the same strategy, and we're going to be working through how we can actually maximize our chances against blue-red today. Let's take a look at that blue-red deck. Today, Colin's going to be playing the blue-red items deck. This is his list, which recently top 8 the CCS 11K. We have not changed any cards from that deck list. There were a few other items lists that also top 8 that deck list, but notables in this list is playing 3 copies of the Queen, as well as 4 copies of Maurice's Workshop. This deck is focused around Maurice's Workshop and items, trying to push out as much card advantage as possible with those cards, as well as the Sisu white package involving Sapphire Coil. Also featuring 2 copies of Be Prepared, just for the unconditional removal. This deck wants to play out almost this entire deck, get to 17 ink, and then play that Dime and Tamatoa in the same turn to win the game with one big Kamehameha, so to speak. Okay, let's take a look at our opening hand for the blue-green deck for this matchup. On this one against blue-red items, we are going to be on the draw, so we'll kind of keep that in mind as we're looking at some of these hand choices and as we move into the deck and playing our matchup. So a couple of notables. We are looking at a really good starting hand here. A lot of the pieces we're really interested in are going to be Sail the Azurite Sea with our one piece of ramp. A Clarabelle in our opening hand might seem kind of counterintuitive to keep, but since it has a 7-drop, but we are absolutely delighted to see it in this opening hand. We know this deck plays out a little bit slower, so our game plan really is just to play ramp at least 2 pieces into a Clarabelle as early as possible, as early as turn 5. So we are looking to play Sail on 2, Grandma Tala on 3, hopefully have Grandma Tala sing, and Donald Duck played out for that second piece of ramp to also get a body on board. Now, cards we don't necessarily always want to keep in our opening hand. We'll talk through those. So Vision of the Future, not something I necessarily want to see early, but we do want to see in the later stages of the game. How Far I'll Go is something in other matchups I would potentially mulligan, but since we are we're playing against blue-red items in this case, and we'll kind of keep that in consideration with this matchup, we know that How Far I'll Go is actually going to be able to ramp us without too much drawback in this blue-red items matchup. Now, something of consideration is we may want to look at our Vision and our Heffalumps and Woozles and say, hey, these are later game cards. We don't necessarily want to see these right away. Let's send it back, and potentially we could high roll a little bit better. Stuff like a Develop Your Brain, stuff like a Popsicle. There's a few other cards I'd like to see to maybe round out our curve. But that being said, if we take a look at the odds on our getting something that's going to be, critically better, and still kind of enhance our gameplay here from moving from that ramp on 2 to our 3-drop, to our Donald Duck and to our Clarabelle. The odds of us sending these cards back and potentially receiving something like an uninkable that's going to brick our hand, or something that may not necessarily be even good at this matchup, like for example, Mother Knows Best, are fairly high. So in this particular game, I did deliberate just a little bit, but I think it is in our best interest just to hold on to these cards. Realistically, we have a good curve, and we don't want to see uninkables if we throw cards back. So I made the choice with this one to just hold on to some of the non-optimal cards, just because there is essentially a downside, and we could do a lot worse if we send these cards back. there is potential upside that we could have taken into consideration and, gotten a slightly better hand, but I don't think it's worth it in this case to potentially draw something like a Lady Tremaine or to draw like a Mother Knows Best in a hand against a deck where we may not necessarily want to see those cards this early. So for this one, we did not alter any cards. I kept all of these 7, and this one was really good for us. All right, and here we are into the match. This is going to be blue-red items on the play against blue-green stacks on the draw for this one. So Colin starts out early with a popsicle. Great start for him. We do have that the ramp pieces we're looking for on the blue-green side with that sail on turn 2, but we did not find a 1-drop in our opening draw. So we see that Heffalumps and Woozles that we talked a little bit about in the opening hand go into ink. Colin here looking for a piece of turn 2 ramp if he has it. Looks like he did not hit it, so he is just cycling through his deck looking for action. And potentially just looking to hit his workshop or a quill on turn 3. If they do know what is up here in this matchup, they are looking to dump their hand as early as possible and then get workshop into play before something like a bend comes down. So here we sail and throw a bell into ink, which we didn't see before, so we know 1 more card out of this deck so far. And we see for Colin, they were able to hit the workshop on 3 to try to set up for turn 4, potentially a quill, or maybe just drawing a couple of cards. He does know a couple of turns out this Clarabelle is going to be something we're looking at playing. Here for Grandma Tala and some of these things, we're just looking for ways to A, empty our hand for this Clarabelle turn, or B, get rid of this workshop. So we would definitely keep a You're Welcome here if we were to find one on top. Otherwise, we're just looking for inkables to keep our hand flowing. Potentially other pieces of ramp, since we do have 2 pieces of ramp coming into our 3 pieces of ramp, coming into our Clarabelle turn. If we were able to find a sail for the Clarabelle turn in this sequencing, then we are actually looking to do that on the Clarabelle turn so we can empty 1 more card while still progressing our board state. So it looks like we did find a Tipo here. And here you see that I rushed to put that Tipo into play, trying to just keep this game moving at a casual pace because we were trying to get a few games in for recordings this day. But it's always better to see more cards first, so that how far I'll go being played first is actually the correct sequencing and how you would like to go about this. So that Tipo still may be the card we want to ink, but it at least gives us more cards and potentially seeing multiple options here. And it did actually pay off to actually see more cards in this case. It looks like we did have 1 sale, but we actually found a second sale off of that how far. And between these 2 sales, we actually completely high rolled on this one on the draw and found this 3rd sale. So you see that we actually have completely gone off of the Donald Duck line, and at this point go 3 sales into lots and lots of ink on this turn to gain even more advantage. There may be an argument for Donald Duck still being the optimal play on this one, but I think we actually ended up better off getting more cards out of our hand, and it just depends on how your hand is kind of looking. It looks like we were able to see more cards, potentially look for that You're Welcome as well here when we're talking about long-term game plan here. We really want to be able to try to play You're Welcome on the turn we do play Clarabelle to try to get more cards into their hand and looking for that bend to my will as that next step of our game plan, right? So it looks like Colin just progressing his board, playing out more items, getting more cards in hand here, and he's just looking for ramp as much as possible, looking for ways to deal with a Clarabelle potentially, and trying to keep up on ink. It's one of the big things the blue-red deck does have to do with this blue-green deck. If they know what's going on and they know that the Clarabelle lines are coming, they want to be able to keep their hand size as low as possible to be able to take advantage of all of their relevant stuff while kind of keeping to a minimum their irrelevant stuff in hand. They can get bricked on the blue-red side by playing stuff like their Sisus and things like that, because they just won't have many targets here. Now, with the ice block in this particular list, he can potentially use the ice block to Sisu that some of the early drops and things like that, but for the most part they're not going to be able to brawl here without taking some of their development off. And here we see on the Clarabelle turn we were able to actually save that Tipo that I almost inked hastily, and because of that, we were able to get our hand a little bit further down and potentially sort through some of the cards that we didn't want to see in this matchup to draw a few more cards. So Colin clapping back here after the Clawbear turn to just get his hand as empty as he possibly can. Killing the Tipo with that Sisu, which we're not too concerned about. The card we do care about here, living, is this Queen. If this Queen is able to get a lot of value, we potentially are going to be in a situation where he has multiple workshops in play, and it becomes more of an uphill battle for us on the blue-green side. So really, we're just trying to neutralize that Queen, and at this phase of the game, after we've established that first Clarabelle, drawn a few cards, we are just trying to draw as many cards as we can to get to that bend to my will and potentially deal with this workshop along the way. So, not normal that we would play the Muses out in this matchup, but it just so happened to be that we're able to deal with the Queen and get one more card back, and actually just get that Mother Knows Best out of our hand, realistically, as a game plan. And here, on the turn after Clarabelle's able to empty my hand entirely with that Tipo. A line I will just mention here as we're talking through this deck is that Tipo sometimes is a card you do want to hold on to just to be able to ink some of your uninkable cards when you are trying to just sort through cards that don't necessarily matter at the time you are playing. So a line like Quest with Tipo, bounce Tipo back to hand and put it into ink is not completely unheard of. It's something you want to keep in mind, because there may be times where you want to double ink and just play that Tipo out to get something like a Mother Knows Best out of your hand, or to get something that is uninkable and not necessarily relevant in the matchup out. So you can see one more card with this Clarabelle. So the line you won't necessarily always do, but something to think about as we're going through here. So from Colin's side, he would have liked to dealt with this Clarabelle this turn, but it looks like he was not able to do that. But the next best thing is just to get a Quill established and try to get his hand really low so that he is not having to deal with these big Clarabelle draws every turn. There is a little bit of tension here, right? So he wants to keep his hand healthy, but at the same time, he knows Bend to My Will is in this deck. He knows I have a lot of ink, potentially can get a lot of redraws this next turn. Needs to deal with a Clarabelle, needs to draw a lot of cards, but not hold on to a lot of cards in hand. So this is a kind of a tension point where sometimes these blue-red players, if they're not used to this matchup, if they are not knowing how to navigate it per se, or not knowing exactly what's happening to them, they might actually address this matchup in the wrong way and not play optimally here. And you can take advantage of that, right? This is really where you can get a couple of more cards off this Clarabelle, get you a little bit closer to your Bend to Your Will, and things like that. So here, just going to trade the, or not trade, but use the Ice Block to actually kill off this Grand Montala, trying to just make you best use of his resources with that Bell. From the blue-green side here, we are just looking to get rid of this workshop and to get a Bend to My Will established as quickly as possible here. So we're going to try to see as many cards as we can to get to a Bend to My Will. We know we have seen quite a few cards already between the sales, the Clarabelle draws, the various Grand Montalas we played out so far. So here we are playing out a Grand Montala, again, looking for dig or looking for pieces to deal with workshop and to Bend to My Will his hand to slow him down. Always looking at as many cards as we can first before we start playing things. If we are going to play stuff like Vision or play stuff like Develop, or even stuff like Grand Montala, you kind of want to make sense of your ink, make sure that your ink is going to make sense for what we are doing here. And what we see that we were able to find that you're welcome, either off of this Grand Montala or off of the draw for the turn, or maybe those Clarabelle draws at the end of the last turn. You're welcome throwing that workshop back on the deck to set him far back. Notably, this blue-red deck does have a few tools already in play, though. We do see he has 8 ink, which is a decent number for them to play with. They do go much wider than that against other decks, but 8 ink is enough for him to play and be prepared to potentially still have a few more draws. We know that he has this Quill established, so him staying on a ton of cards is not necessarily a great thing for us either. And on this turn, we want to make note that he has 2 of the Vitalospheres in play, so he can potentially get us with this Bell if we were to exert our Clarabelle. So in the turns where we are, looking to turn the corner into being that aggressive deck and actually getting our work done with trying to close this game out. We don't have the highest clock in the world, but we do want to be careful with their Clarabelle and try to protect it so that a few different things, they can't hold cards in hand effectively, and so that we can have that big body potentially to challenge or to potentially just quest us up to where we need to be. We do want to keep that pressure up though, so we'll throw a couple of these things that we don't care about as much into the questing ring, so to speak. Tipo and the Muses can be exerted here. Muse is not a really high priority card in this matchup as much as it is in some of the others. All right, from Colin's side here, really our worst card at this moment that we don't want to see is going to be probably a Be Prepared. So after the bend in my will, we're really just looking to take advantage of us being ahead on resources here with so much ink advantage and our characters going fairly wide. He does not have that Sapphire Coil out, and because we put him back to 0 cards in hand, he is going to have to play items out in order to actually get his card count up. So realistically, it has to be that Popsicle in order to net gain cards, even with 1 Workshop in play. So no Workshop in play, just drawing off the top from his side. He is able to take advantage of this Bell and actually get some free value here between the Popsicles and the Shield of Virtue. So challenging and then readying to potentially challenge again. From our side, when he throws it back to us, we aren't necessarily worried about our Tipo. But here is a phase of the game and a play that you may want to consider. So if you see you're welcome at this phase of the game where we have depleted this blue-red deck on resources, but we are just trying to continue a steady clock, here is where we will make a play such as throwing a Popsicle or a character that we don't value that much into a You're Welcome to act as a pseudo friends on the other side, just to potentially get more relevant cards, to get more dig, and to try to close this game quicker, or potentially put more lock pieces like a Basil into play, where you can pressure his hand over and over again, or potentially have multiple Clarabelles where we can start pressuring life in lore count. So it looks like we're able to get another Clarabelle off of this. So just going to establish this as a big body that's really difficult for this deck to remove and potentially push us into more resources. So from his side, just doing a little bit of math, and for our side, seeing, okay, over the course of how many turns is it going to take me to actually win this game with the cards I have in play? How much do I want to commit to potentially a top deck Be Prepared, while still keeping pressure on the other side? So we always want to hold a little bit of resources if we have that luxury to play around a Be Prepared here. There's a little bit of glare on this one. It looks like Colin was able to find a Donald Duck, he is playing off of items here, just deliberating a little bit of what items to actually exert to get this Donald Duck. I think what he finally decided was that he wanted to leave his Fishbone Quill up to potentially be able to ink something so that Clarabelle is not going to get value. And a little bit lucky for us here. We'll definitely take him where we can. We just played all of our outs as much as we can. Donald Duck did not find an item on this, which is relatively rare. I'm not, I'd say we won't count on that here. Donald Duck, of course, with the Vitalosphere, is able to trade with this Clarabelle, so this is something where he just set us back just a little bit. A little bit of a misplay is if he would have used his Shield of Virtue, he would have been able to take out this Bell as well. That was exerted by challenging the Bell first, readying it with Shield of Virtue, and then actually getting the Clarabelle after. But I don't think that sequencing matters too much in the course of this game. We'll kind of keep an eye on that. And here we're just establishing more Clarabelles. We know they're not incredibly high value here, but it's a 5/6 quester for 2. Colin looks like he found an item off the top of his deck, and of course, without that workshop, items, a lot of the items in this deck are not necessarily doing anything, but that was a good top deck off of the Popsicle, finding a Be Prepared to set us way back here, hitting 2 Clarabelles in that Bell. And here is where we are just looking to reestablish everything in our clock again, right? 13 to 0 is definitely not as critical of a lore count as we'd like to be at this phase of the game. But, we're looking at the blue red player on nearly no resources at this point based off of our early plays. We just need to have consistency here. On this one, we play a Basil out and just play a Tipo and maintain our card count. Remember, you do not have to use the bounce on Basil, but something I'll mention here as well, especially against this in this blue-green deck, against this blue-red deck, and similar decks where we don't necessarily want to play into a Be Prepared. Keep in mind that if you do have something like a value card like Grand Matala, you can, of course, return the Grand Matala to your hand with the Basil and then replay it just to see a little more cards and to keep your deck going while not overcommitting into a Be Prepared. Of course, that wasn't the case here. We didn't have the Grand Matala just yet. But we do like establishing this Basil against blue-red because it means that on these subsequent turns after Basil is established, and you see the workshop was able to be found the turn after that, they are no longer able to keep cards in hand at all. They have to play off the top every single turn, and it's something maybe to consider, as you're getting this mid to late stage of the game. Here, I make a play that I think may be a little bit questionable, which is the You're Welcome on the workshop and then using Basil to discard one card. Another potential play we could have made here is just using the You're Welcome on our Tipo to potentially find a higher value card, but I prioritize just keeping him low on resources, and having one card in hand is not something we're terribly worried about, so this basically gets to negate the effect of the You're Welcome quite a bit here. In this case, he was able to redraw one of the workshops, and we were actually hit it, so that card at random worked out in our favor here, but maybe not necessarily the best line all the time. It's something that I chose to do at this point. And here we see where some of these blue-red draws can kind of bite them is he's seeing cards, but he's not necessarily seeing cards of value. So at this point, Little Sisu isn't really a card that does anything to us without him having additional resources like the Sapphire Coil in play and then the extra ink to be able to utilize it, right? And then Bell, which is in this deck, so they have a really good shot against some of the aggressive decks and even some of the purple decks. We don't care about his bells, right? Like this is more or less a brick top deck for him. So these blue-red items decks do have a lot of value in them, but against our blue-green deck, the way the deck is constructed right now, there are so many different things in the blue-red deck that just don't matter. It helps us in these mid and late games, right? Like the cards that you care about is a very short list. And if you can minimize the impact of those cards, you really can have set up to have your best shot into the blue-red item stacks. And here, one of those few cards that blue-red is really looking to take advantage of. Maybe a Maui here would actually be pretty decent. He would be able to clean up both of these things, but really doesn't advance his game state so much as just stall ours. He does have a workshop here, so that helps him quite a bit. But we pressured him up to 19 lore. So even though he is able to deal with both of our characters here, he isn't kind of a do or die situation at every phase of us playing new things here, right? So it's another situation where I didn't have anything to play with the Basil, but I know that Basil is a difficult body for him to deal with. Muses he could deal with a big Sisu, but that's not going to be enough. And it looks like his draw off the top was a Maui, a little bit too late on that one to have any kind of impact. So another one of those examples of they play a lot of good cards, but not all of their good cards are necessarily going to be good in every situation in which they are playing this blue-green deck. Now, I'll reiterate for just talking through this matchup, this is a situation where Colin knows this deck. He's played me a lot of times at locals, and we've tested back and forth together. So he knows this blue-green deck better than most people are going to. But the situation here is that even though he knows kind of what lines I have available to me and things like that and how to play around them, he just doesn't, the deck is built in such a way that they're not considering blue-green in their matchup list. And something I've mentioned before in some of the chats and talking back and forth with people that are trying this deck and having maybe frustration with blue-red items is It's a big deal that they don't necessarily know all of your play lines. They're not going to have experience with this deck and necessarily how to play around every single one of your lines. So they don't know how to treat this deck at all corners. And a lot of the cards in their deck aren't meant for you. And the overlap between us and other decks is relatively slim. We have a lot of high power characters, a lot of things they're going to have to spend multiple resources into dealing with, or things that, give us value immediately when they come down, such as your Grand Montalas, potentially your Clarabelles, or even your Basils. These are cards that play multiple functions for our deck, but at the same time, without like Sapphire Coils, they're not able to favorably trade with these things. If we're able to keep their hands low and keep their resources kind of on tilt where they're having tension between their ink and the cards they're seeing, you leave them with fewer and fewer options and you kind of grind them into dust, which is what happened here. Like he every turn had to find good answers for these two questers, for these high value characters, had to keep his hand low at the same time as actually addressing some of our threats, and it just becomes a lot. So as you play this matchup more and as you start to become familiar with like what is in the blue-red deck and what their play lines tend to be, it'll help you quite a bit in trying to navigating this one. I don't think it's a freebie by any chance, and I know we got a little bit of a high roll on this one with the multiple sales early, but that's what you have to play for, is you have to, when you're approaching these matchups that you think may be difficult or have a lot of decision points, is give yourself every potential out. And sometimes the cards won't line up for you, and sometimes they will. But you want to play to a situation where you can win these games and that you have your best chance at making the plays and drawing the cards that are going to be relevant. We do see a lot of cards in this blue-green deck, so you do have the chance to play out of a lot of situations with more and more reps and getting more experience on the deck. I hope this one helped. Guys, if you really enjoyed this one, throw me a comment in the section below. Throw me a like and a subscribe. I'm trying to get this channel off the ground and getting a little bit more content for you guys. Especially let me know in the comments what other types of decks matchups you'd like to see. I'm not just stuck on this blue-green deck. I'm a blue-red player through and through from a long period of time, but I also know how to play a lot of different decks. I've had success with a lot of different decks and played TCGs for a very long time, so I'll be happy to try to highlight matchups that you want to see and kind of how they should be played out. I have different players I can call upon in different formats here, so trying to get our quality up and get more stuff out that you guys like. Drop me a comment, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content, and we'll get more out soon. Thank you.